Filipinos will choose the next leaders of the country. And the stakes are high as the nation awaits directions in navigating through this overwhelming health crisis, among others.
So there was a lack of sense of urgency, that instead of locking down right away or closing borders right away, they were still thinking of hurting the feelings of China. Vaccines could have been more made available earlier.
They will pitch their costs.
It's a mandate of the Department of Agrarian Reform that we do not only distribute land to the landless farmers, but we also subject them to some sort of a training and we give them support.
And why they deserve your vote.
What kind of government would, would disarm itself with policies and safeguards that would protect its own agriculture, earn revenues for the country?
Find out their plan of action for change. And as they chart the country's future, their political future is in your hands. Who are qualified? Who are worthy to serve in the 19th Congress? Watch them side by side here on CNN Philippines.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Rico Hizon, and welcome to the CNN Philippines Senatorial Forum, where we get to know our candidates by asking them questions and issues that matter to you, Filipinos. Tonight, former cabinet secretaries and a health advocate will make a pitch on why they deserve your vote. We will introduce them to you in alphabetical order. The 60-year-old senatorial candidate is running under the ruling PDP Laban Party. He studied at the Notre Dame University in the UK with a degree of Master of Laws in Comparative Government and International Law. He founded Partido Federal ng Pilipinas and also served in the Transportation, Interior, and Agrarian Reform Departments. Welcome, former DAR Secretary John Castriciones. The 62-year-old senatorial candidate is running under the Partido para sa Demokratikong Reforma. She obtained Doctor of Medicine in UP Manila. She is the president of iBank Foundation of the Philippines and the Association of iBanks in Asia. She's also the technical advisor for Philippine Organ Donation and Transplantation Program of the Department of Health. Welcome, health advocate Dr. Minguita Padilla. The 68-year-old senatorial candidate is running under the Nationalist People's Coalition. He studied at the University of Southern Mindanao with a doctorate degree in rural economic development. He served as Cotabato's governor and chairman of the Mindanao Development Authority. Welcome, former Agriculture Secretary Manny Piñol. All three will be joining us via Zoom. Now, I would like to remind everyone that this is not a debate. This is about letting voters understand your platforms, principles, and stand on issues. We have compiled questions. Each of you will be given a time limit for each answer when you hear this sound. And that means you only have 10 seconds left and you need to wrap up your answer. And to those of you watching online or from your homes, you can join the conversation by using the hashtag CNNPH Senatorial Forum. All right, let's begin the program with this timely topic, living with the virus. This is how our economic managers are shifting our recovery program from pandemic to endemic. Socio-Economic Planning Secretary Carl Kendrick Chua says there's a need to accelerate vaccination, reopen the economy, and expand transport capacity. Economic managers are now formulating a pandemic playbook to take stock of the lessons learned. And the question is, what laws will you craft that would complement our economic managers' strategy? You have 90 seconds. Secretary John Castriciones, we will start off with you. He joins us now via phone patch.
Hello, Rico. Good evening. And to all the viewers of CNN, good evening. First of all, with regards to that question, I believe that everyone has really experienced the difficulty that was brought about by the pandemic, and the economy is hardly hit. So what we can do is we have to stimulate our economic approaches so that we would be able to attain that level wherein we would be able to recover. And I'm particularly very concerned about small and medium industries. I think it is high time that we should be able to extend more assistance to them, like loans, and also by giving them the opportunity to really be excused when it comes to the payment of taxes and giving them more incentives to that effect. Because, the hardest hit in our economy are the small and the medium enterprises. And the only way to recover is by giving them a certain breathing space so that they would be able to really feel the assistance that is being given by the government. And of course, we should also stimulate other kinds of businesses that would have to generate jobs for our people. A lot of our people have been unemployed, which was brought about by this pandemic, affecting all our economy, not only our economy, but the economies of other countries as well. And of course, we know that we are all interdependent to each other, and that is the reason why we must have to do something in order to improve and in order to really reach out to our people so that they would have the opportunity to earn their tips, their money for keeping their families alive. And
your time is up. Thank you so much for your response. Dr. Padilla, if you win, what laws will you craft to complement our economic manager's strategy? You have 90 seconds.
Well, first of all, I totally agree that we should already go into endemic mode, okay? Stop these lockdowns already, as soon as possible. We don't have to do it whole country. We can do it granular. Whoever 70% already vaccinated, go na tayo, no? I agree with the incentives, especially for MSMEs. We might have to also consider now easing the laws on investments of foreigners to make it easier for foreign investments to come in to jumpstart our economy. We also have to have less red tape, also for investors. And we can do the brave, the budget reform agenda for village empowerment, more money to the barrios so that we can incentivize them and increase the jobs in the barrios, because that's one of the platforms of our party. Now we give the money straight to the LGUs, to the barangays, to the cities, and to the provinces, okay? So that they will be able to plan their projects and put jobs there as soon as possible with less red tape. So no more Imperial Manila. It should start from there. And aside from that, I agree with the incentivization as explained by Secretary John. And I want a pandemic preparedness act so that we don't have to go through all of this again. So that we are prepared, our hospitals are prepared, and we don't have to go through the lockdowns. We have to plan for the next pandemic because it's coming. Vaccines, generics, drug manufacturers, all of that. We should be prepared.
Thank you so much, Dr. Padilla. Secretary Manny Piñol, same question. You have 90 seconds.
Before I left the Mindanao Development Authority as chairman, I actually asked UNDP to conduct a study on the effect of COVID-19 on the lives of our people. And 3 issues came out: food, jobs, and health. Now, we have to address this problem by providing a pump priming law that would boost the food production, provide jobs, and I have already prepared a draft of a legislative action, which I call LINDA, or Local Industries Development Authority, which would provide support for local industries, especially those involved in food production, to not only provide the country with enough food, but also provide jobs. You have to understand that during the pandemic, thousands of Filipinos actually lost their jobs, both locally and in other countries. We have to review our jobs program. We have to review our policies in food production. We have to work. We have to come up with laws that would protect our local producers, because we have experienced during the pandemic that we could not possibly rely on imported sources of our food supplies. And for our health, we have to we have to introduce a legislation that would review our health program, especially health insurance, because a lot of our families actually suffered a lot in this pandemic.
Thank you so much, former Secretary Manny Piñol. Let's move on now to our next topic. And there are about 17 million Filipino smokers, according to the Health Department. And to reduce smoking rate and save lives, Congress passed the Vaporized Nicotine Product Bill, also known as the Vape Bill. And it aims to regulate and expand access to e-cigarettes and heated tobacco products. As the bill awaits President Duterte's signature, several groups, including the Department of Health and medical societies, have expressed their opposition. Aside from the bill lowering the age of those allowed to buy vape products from 21 to 18, doctors also reiterated that e-cigarettes and vapes are still as harmful as conventional cigarettes. And now, here's the question. What is your stand on the vape bill? In your opinion, is it a friend or an enemy? You have 90 seconds to answer. Let's start off with Secretary Manny Piñol. Your time starts now.
Any vice is always an enemy, and the government must regulate it. What level, at what age, it needs further study. And I understand that the vape bill actually is now up for consolidation by the bicameral committee of both Congress and Senate. And it would be too late for me, for example, to even comment on it. We have to look at it. But my position is that I have always been against anything that would introduce vices to our young people in this country.
So, Secretary Piñol, should it be vetoed by President Duterte?
I believe it should be vetoed.
The whole law or only portions of the bill?
Portions of the bill which would allow young people access to vape.
What about the regulator? It has been transferred from the FDA to the Department of Trade and Industry. What should be done there?
I don't think DTI is the proper agency to regulate something that involves people's health.
Mm-hmm. So, if you believe that this is not a law for the people, then the whole thing should then be vetoed by President Duterte.
Well, you know, we cannot possibly stop people from getting into a vice like vape. But there's got to be regulation to ensure that young people are not drawn into that vice at an early age.
All right.
Which would affect their health.
All right.
Number two, as I pointed out,
I'm sorry,
DTI is not the proper
Piñol,
agency.
Your time is up. Secretary John Castriciones, what is your stand on this? You have 90 seconds.
Rico, I think that is a friendly bill. It is a friendly bill in the sense that it gives way to regulation. You know, for a start, we have to regulate this practice of using this vape. We know for a fact that it is some sort of a mode or a fashion, and a lot of people are using it. And there's no way within which the government would be able to stop all of the people who are now into this kind of practice. And that is the reason why it's a good start that there must be a law that would have to regulate it. It might not be perfect, but the thing is there's something that we can start it with. It's like, for example, prostitution. We all know that prostitution is not allowed. It is something that is, of course, barred by law, but it's still being, a lot of people are still into it. As they say, it's the oldest profession, and that's the reason why there's a need to regulate it. And that's the reason why this vape bill must be a friendly measure in order to see to it that we would be able to regulate the same. In the near future, after having probably implemented this law, we would be able to evaluate what are the good points and the bad points. One of which, of course, is the lowering of the age of people who can actually make use of the vape. And that is the reason why I think we have to somehow evaluate and to study it so that we would be able to come up with a perfect law that would be implemented. What is the use of forbidding our people not to use vape when, in fact, we cannot even implement the same?
All right. Secretary John, thank you so much for your views. And Dr. Padilla, you are a medical expert. What is your stand on this vape bill?
Okay, I am against smoking. I never smoked in my life, and I am a health advocate. However, I do realize that some people who want to quit smoking cannot do it cold turkey, and they use the vape, they use the e-cigarettes. And now I know there's this new technology called smokeless tobacco or tobacco without any tar, which even the US FDA says is safer, okay? However, this vape bill, I believe, there must be a line veto of at least 2 provisions. One is the lowering of the age to 18. I think it's a dangerous provision and will encourage earlier starting of these things because they're not as innocuous as you think they are. Number 2, well, also, the brain is still developing after 18, and this will open this purchasing of these gadgets and these vapes to people still in their senior high years, Number 2 is the DTI. It should not be under the DTI. The Department of Trade and Industry is not the correct agency to regulate vaping because this is a chemical. This is a substance which enters the body and can actually cause harm. And they don't have the capacity to analyze data that involves health because the data regarding vaping and other forms of innovative tobacco products is still there's an evolution. It's evolving. And the agency that can best evaluate these things is the FDA. Now, if they really want to have some DTI hold over this, the sale, etc., at least have a joint regulatory function, not exclusive for DTI. It's a wrong agency.
Thank you so much, Dr. Padilla. And before we go on a break, here's a question answerable for all our senatorial candidate guests tonight by yes or no. No explanations needed. You just need to raise the green signboard. And that is for Dr. Padilla and for Secretary Piñol. And of course, we will ask Secretary John to give us a yes or no because he is on a phone patch mode. So, marijuana or cannabis remains an illegal and dangerous drug in the country. Possession of at least 500 grams of cannabis is punishable by life imprisonment and a fine of up to 10 million pesos. Despite strict laws in the country, marijuana is the second most commonly abused drug, according to the Dangerous Drugs Board. President Duterte had previously supported the use of medical marijuana, but later said it will not be legalized under his watch due to lack of definitive findings. And the question is, are you in favor of legalizing marijuana for medical and scientific purposes? Yes or no? Secretary Piñol? So that's yes for Secretary Piñol and for Dr. Padilla. What about for you, Secretary John? Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay, so it is unanimous yes for our 3 senatorial candidate guests. This is a CNN Philippines special presentation. We'll get to know more about our senatorial candidates after this break. Welcome back to the CNN Philippines Senatorial Forum. I'm Rico Hizon. Tonight, we are joined by 2 former cabinet secretaries and a health advocate, all first-time running for the Senate. Secretary John Castriciones, we have Dr. Minguita Padilla, and Secretary Manny Piñol. They will make their pitch and respond to questions on issues that matter to you, the Filipino voter. We are live on free-to-air TV and on cable, as well as on Facebook at CNN Philippines. And to our audience at home and online, feel free to join the conversation by using the hashtag CNNPH Senatorial Forum. And we are opening this segment with a question from a netizen. Let's watch this.
Magandang araw po. Ako po si Dr. Agong Aljun Kayawan ng tribong Agusanon Manubo mula po dito sa Agusan del Sur. At ako po ay may katanungan po sa inyong lahat. Kapag kayo po ang nanalo bilang senador, ano po ang inyong mga plano at programa para sa aming mga katutubo? Paano niyo po poproteksyonan ang aming mga karapatan, lalong-lalo na sa aming mga lupang ninuno? Maraming salamat po.
Aljun belongs to the estimated 10 to 20% indigenous peoples in the 103 million national population. While retaining their pre-colonial culture and institutions, IPs generally live in geographically isolated areas with lack of access to social services. Even with the promulgation of the 1997 Indigenous Peoples' Rights Act, or IPRA, IPs are continuously vulnerable to development aggression and land grabbing. And according to the Denmark-based International Workgroup for Indigenous Affairs, or IWGIA, a global group defending IP rights, state institutions are weaponized to attack and red tag IP rights defenders and deny them justice. In Mindanao, the Save Our Schools network documented 32 attacks on Lumad schools, forcing the closure of 178 schools and denying 6,000 students their right to education. You have 90 seconds to answer Datu Aljun's concern on laws protecting rights of the indigenous peoples. Let's start off with Dr. Minguita Padilla. Doctor, your time starts now.
Our indigenous people are Filipinos, and they should be proud of their culture. And we should protect their culture and not abuse them or not give them less in life. They have to have more in life. Now, I don't, it's my first time to run for public office. No, I will make sure talaga that we protect their rights. And we give them the right education. We go out of our way to reach out to them for universal health care, for education. We give them electricity because some of them don't even have electricity or generators. So we will try to reach out to them and integrate them into our society without destroying their uniqueness. You know, my great-grandmother on my mother's side was Igorot. She's from Carao in Benguet, a unique culture, which is not exactly Ibaloy. And I appreciate this very much. I think we should treasure our indigenous people. We should not try to change them. We should try to treasure them and even create maybe cultural tourism to give them more funds and be proud of them. And definitely give them access to education and to health. Universal healthcare is for everyone, whether indigenous or not. I think that's the simplest way to explain. And land grabbing should stop. Definitely should stop. We should develop their land and even integrate it into our tourism and to so many businesses you can do without sacrificing their uniqueness. That's what we should do for them.
Thank you so much, Dr. Padilla. Secretary Manny Piñol, what bills would you propose to protect the rights of indigenous peoples? You have 90 seconds.
First, I will relate to you what I have done and later move on to what I intend to do more. As governor of North Cotabato, I organized the Cotabato Tribal Elders Council, and the head of that council actually became an executive assistant to the governor, which gave them representation in the provincial government. As Secretary of Agriculture, I created the Indigenous Peoples Desk in the Department of Agriculture. I designated an officer, an IP officer, who went around the country coordinating with the various indigenous peoples groups to ask them what they needed and introduce programs to them. I designed the program personally. It's called 4Ks, Kabuhayan at Kaunlaran ng Katutubong mga kapatid na katutubo. And it's now a program of the Department of Agriculture which hopes to alleviate the indigenous people from poverty to a life which is more comfortable. I actually introduced a program. It's called Bantay Kagubatan when Gina Lopez was still DNR Secretary. And that program actually wanted to tap indigenous peoples in the reforestation of the denuded mountains of this country, with them receiving monthly remuneration for every tree planted in their area. And this is what I intend to legislate, a program that would promote tree farming in the indigenous people's ancestral domain so that we'll be able to lift them up from poverty.
Thank you so much, Secretary Piñol. Secretary Castriciones, what measures would you introduce to protect the rights of our indigenous peoples? 90 seconds, please.
Bilang katugunan po sa inyong tanong, Datu, alam ko po na kaiiba po ang kultura ng ating pong mga IPs at kailangan po natin pakinggan ang kanilang mga kahilingan at kung ano ang kanilang interes. Hindi po natin pwedeng isaksak sa mga lalamunan ng ating pong mga kapatid na IP ang mga batas na hindi naaayon sa kanilang tradisyon at kultura. Kaya po, Datu, akin po, ang gagawin ko po bilang isang senador ay unang-una sa pamamagitan ng konsultasyon ay bibigyan po natin ng pagkakataon ng ating mga IP na magtalaga at magbigay ng kanilang mga suhestyon kung paano po bibigyan ng katugunan ng kanilang mga pangangailangan. Alam ko po ang pinakamalaking issue po ng ating po mga IP, yun ay tungkol po sa mga ancestral lands. At ito po ay dapat nating pansinin sapagkat unti-unti na pong nawawalan ng lupa ang ating pong mga IP. Talagang naitutulak na po sila sa mga liblib na pook doon sa mga kabundukan na kung saan ay lalong humihirap ang buhay ng ating mga indigenous people. Kaya Datu, ang una-una ko pong gagawin ay dapat pong bigyan ng kasiguruhan na dapat ang ating mga IPs ay magkaroon ng talagang karapatan sa kanilang mga ancestral lands na kanilang ipinaglalaban. Pangalawa, ay dapat din bigyan ng katugunan ang pangangailangan ng bawat individual na mga IPs. At ayaw po natin na ilan lamang tribo ang siyang makikinabang sa mga lupang na ibibigay sa kanila. Bigyan natin sila ng tamang edukasyon ng naaayon sa kanilang kahilingan at kultura at tradisyon. Yan po ang ating pong gagawin.
Thank you so much for your response to the issues of the indigenous peoples of the country. And moving on, in the 2021 Philippine Trust Index of the Ion Group, 90% of Filipinos gave their biggest trust to the church among institutions. An analyst says religious groups are likely to influence Filipinos in deciding who they will vote for. But while the Philippines is predominantly a Catholic nation, Catholics never voted as a bloc. This is a different case with Iglesia ni Cristo, the third biggest group next to Roman Catholics and Muslims. Historically, INC observes bloc voting. But an INC endorsement does not guarantee a victory, like in the case of a Rodrigo Duterte Bongbong Marcos endorsement in the 2016 polls. In this year's elections, embattled Pastor Apollo Quiboloy of Kingdom of Jesus Christ Group and El Shaddai founder Mike Velarde are openly endorsing the tandem of Bongbong Marcos and Sara Duterte. INC has yet to endorse candidates in the May 9th poll. And now the question is, for our candidates, what is your stand on political endorsements made by religious leaders? You have 90 seconds to answer. You are first to be asked this question, Secretary John Castriciones. Your time starts now.
I think the church has a big role when it comes to shaping up the minds of people in order to choose the right candidates. But of course, to specifically name people who should be voted upon is like imposing upon your members of the church the choice that should be made by the individual himself. And that is the reason why it would not be good to name names. Probably what is good is that they should try to identify the qualities, the qualifications, the so-called values and virtues that are necessary for a certain candidate in order to be the guidelines that would have to make the individual members of the said churches in order to choose the right person or the right party or the right people to be voted upon. And I am sure that if the churches would do it this way, our members of the church would be able to really make the right decisions that would have to result in the so-called selection of the right people that would have to man the helm of the government. We know for a fact that church are very influential, and that is the reason why giving them the so-called guidelines, giving them the so-called parameters as to how they would be able to gauge and how they would be able to really choose the right person upon will really help our drive for a clean government and for the choosing of the right people that would have to man the helm of government.
Thank you so much, Secretary John. Dr. Padilla, what is your position on religious leaders endorsing political candidates? You have 90 seconds.
I believe in the saying, it came from the Bible, give unto Caesar that which is Caesar's and give unto God that which is God's. The priests, I'm talking first as a Catholic, no? Our priests, I believe, and our bishops have the obligation to guide their flock, no? How to choose the right leaders. They can guide them, they should guide them. But hindi nila dapat gamitin yung pulpit, yung misa, para sabihin sa mga parokya, sa mga parishioners, ito ang dapat yung iboto. Hindi ako naniniwala dito. It can cause division, it can cause confusion, and it can even cause embarrassment for the people who are doing this, no? Pwede silang magsabi nag-advise sa kanilang mga parokyanos in private, okay? As your priest, as your preacher, as your parish priest, as your bishop, ito ang sa tingin ko ang dapat na iboto mo. Pero wag mo sasabihin, dapat ito talaga ang dapat iboto ng simbahan. Wala akong ganyang boto, no? There's no Catholic vote. And you'll end up displeasing and even alienating some Catholics because of that. No? I, for one, it happened to me, because one priest was so rabid for one candidate, which I did not naman believe is my candidate. And I stopped going to the mass that the priest was saying. I still go to church, but with a different priest. So I believe that they should guide their flock, but not force a candidate into our throats and not say that this is the candidate for all of us.
Thank you, Dr. Padilla. Secretary Manny Piñol, what do you think of religious leaders endorsing candidates? 90 seconds, please.
Every political candidate, Rico, would always want to be endorsed by a group, be it civic, social, or religious. I don't see anything wrong with religious groups or religious leaders endorsing political candidates. And I don't think there is an infringement on that constitutional provision on the separation of the church and the state. It is, I believe, the obligation of every religious leader to guide his flock, to guide the members of his church. And absolutely nothing wrong with the religious leaders making endorsements. They're not forcing anyway. They're not forcing their members to vote for a certain candidate. It's just a guideline on who to vote. And absolutely nothing wrong with political leaders and religious groups endorsing political candidates.
But Secretary Piñol, for it to be fair for all candidates, should religious groups also invite all the candidates rather than just endorsing one or two to their services so their followers can decide?
Endorsements are not ours to ask. It is theirs to give. So who are we to dictate on them on who to endorse and who not to endorse? I don't really see the point of say for example telling the Catholic Church, say pwede ba palinyahin nyo kami, piliin nyo kung sino ang i-endorse nyo sa amin. I don't think that's right. We leave it all up to the religious groups and religious leaders to choose who they believe would be able to serve this country better.
Thank you so much, Secretary Manny. Let's now go to our yes or no question. Again, you don't have to explain your answer. Use the corresponding signboards to let us know your stand on this issue. Senator Win Gatchalian is urging the Office of the Ombudsman to file several cases against Energy Secretary Alfonso Cusi and other key officials for allowing the sale of the Malampaya natural gas field to businessman Dennis Uy. Gatchalian says it is unlawful for Cusi and other energy officials to approve the 90% sale of one of the country's biggest energy sources. President Duterte defended Cusi and said the private deal must be respected. So here's the question. Do you favor the sale of 90% of the Malampaya natural gas field to businessman Dennis Uy? Yes or no? Secretary Piñol? So both no. What about you, Secretary John Castriciones? Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay, we have a split vote there. 2 no's and 1 yes. When we come back, this is a CNN Philippines special presentation. We'll hear more from our senatorial candidates after the break. Stay with us. Welcome back to the CNN Philippines Senatorial Forum. I'm Rico Hizon, and we are live on free-to-air TV and on cable, as well as on Facebook at CNN Philippines. 3 candidates are joining us tonight: Secretary John Castriciones, Dr. Minguita Padilla, and Secretary Manny Piñol. Again, we are not having a debate. This is about letting voters understand your platforms, principles, and stand on issues. For each question, you will be given a time limit to answer. And when you hear this sound, that means you only have 10 seconds left and you need to wrap up your answer. Before he steps down from office, President Duterte will decide if he will enact into law the SIM card registration bill. And this measure seeks to register SIM cards with the owner's name, birthday, gender, and address. And this will help enforcers track down mobile users engaging in criminal activities, as well as phone-aided terrorism, fraud, and spams. And this will also require all social media networks to get real names and phone numbers of users upon creation of their accounts. But critics have warned the measure may be used for government surveillance and embolden enforcement agencies to abuse the information at hand. And the question is, how do you propose to make this measure foolproof, non-exploitative, and effective in fighting crimes and trolls? 90 seconds for your answer. Secretary Manny Piñol, your time starts now. Secretary Piñol, you're on mute.
I'm sorry.
Yes, go ahead.
This is a very controversial measure, Rico. First, it involves possible invasion of people's privacy. And if the purpose of the law is just to address crime, prevent terrorism, I think our enforcement agencies are capable of doing that already with the advancements in the capacity of our enforcement agencies to monitor cybercrime, even cyber libel. So ako nag-aalangan ako dyan kasi kailangan nating pag-aralan ng mabuti yan. Baka gamitin ito to encroach on people's privacy. And for me, actually, personal privacy is a very, very important issue. And I actually have my second thoughts on this measure, even if it is already up for the president's signing. I think we should really take a second look at this measure and look at its implications on the issue of personal privacy.
So should President Duterte, just like the vape bill, veto this SIM registration bill?
It needs further consultations, I believe. This is not a simple measure, Rico. Things like this, actually, which involve people's privacy, should be carefully studied, and it should not be rushed simply because the president is stepping down.
Thank you so much for your response, Secretary Manny. Secretary John, how would you ensure data privacy with the SIM card registration bill? 90 seconds, please.
I think this bill is really very important. Now, these days, we know for a fact that a lot of transactions are being done through this kind of technology. And we are also aware of the fact that there are so many crimes that are being committed, even in the presence of the so-called crime prevention law. I mean, cybercrime prevention law. Still, there are a lot of violations that are being committed. And that is the reason why this is the best step that we can do and initiate in order to see to it that we will be able to stop the so-called commission of crimes. Now, when it comes to the abuse of the so-called bill in such a way that it would affect the privacy of private persons, individuals, for that matter, I think what we can do is we strengthen the bill, or the law for that matter, by imposing heavier punishment for government officials or law enforcers that would have to violate the privacy of other persons. And I think in this step, we would be able to come up with a more secure technology that would have to allow modernization when it comes to transaction. Now, all the transactions that are actually being done throughout the world are being done through this kind of technology right now. And would that be good if we will not be able to really ride this kind of trend or fashion in terms of this utilization? And that is the reason why we need to really do our best that we should be able to control the same by coming up with this kind of law that would have to control everything.
Thank you, Sec John. Dr. Padilla, how will you make this bill foolproof, non-exploitative, and effective in combating crimes and trolls if you become senator? You have 90 seconds.
Well, I am actually in favor of registering SIM cards because I know so many people have been victimized by anonymous texts. No, they hack your phone, they steal your identity. Some people lose their life savings because of the cell phone, because of all these criminal activities. So yes, we should have the registration. Those of us who have postpaid cards, we register. Our names are there. But I don't fear that I'm being a victim of my security or my privacy. No. And I think, in order to make sure that it is not abused, we have to make sure that the service providers are also held liable if they sell our data. Because I know some people in service in the networks, they sell data. They should be really held responsible if they do that. And the law enforcement agency should also be given, I agree with Secretary John, that they should also be given tougher penalties should they violate our privacy. But I believe a law like this is necessary because there has been so much abuse, so many lives destroyed by criminal activities done through unregistered numbers, anonymous numbers. And even now with the elections, we have a lot of this paninira. Grabe yung paninira. By cell phone numbers we cannot trace. I was once a victim of a bogus website using my face to market a drug, and NBI could not trace them. because there was no way to trace them. We need to also protect the consumers and protect the public.
Thank you so much, Dr. Padilla. And we will be taking a short break in this senatorial forum. But before that, you have to answer this question with a yes or a no. Facebook user Lino Maurial wants to know, are you, your families included, already vaccinated and boosted against COVID-19? Raise your signboards, yes or no. May we have yes for Dr. Padilla and for Secretary Piñol? You're on mute once again.
Question quite clearly.
Oh, are you fully vaccinated together with your family members, and are they also boosted?
Yes.
Okay, yes. What about you, Secretary Castriciones?
Yes na yes.
Okay, yes na yes. All have had their primary doses and have been boosted. And you're watching a CNN Philippines special presentation. We'll be taking a short break. Keep it right here on CNN Philippines. News you can use, news you can trust. Welcome back to the CNN Philippines Senatorial Forum, and this is the sixth in a series of forums where we get to know our senatorial candidates. Earlier, Secretary John Castriciones, Dr. Minguita Padilla, and Secretary Manny Piñol answered questions on various issues. Right now, they will be asking questions to each other. You will be given 2 minutes to answer, and when you hear this sound, that means you only have 10 seconds left and you need to wrap up your answer. Secretary John, we will start off with you. And let me get the name of your fellow candidate you will be asking the question to. This question, Secretary John, is for Secretary Manny. Please ask your question. You have 2 minutes. Secretary? Secretary John Castriciones?
Yes.
Yes. We are now in this segment wherein you will direct a specific question to one of the senatorial candidate guests this evening. And we have picked Secretary Manny Piñol. You can now ask him your question.
Secretary Manny, are you agreeable with the rice tarification bill? And in the event that you would become a senator, what would be your legislation that would have to somehow either correct or to approve the rice tarification bill?
The rice tarification law, John. The rice tarification law, John, is one of the biggest legislative blunders of the Senate, as authored by the economic managers. They promised that if we allow the flooding of our local market with imported rice, the price of rice in the market would go down by 7 pesos. It did not happen. They promised that with the tariff collected from the RTL, our farmers would have a better life. That did not happen. In fact, the prices of palay at farm gate collapsed. And so I don't believe that the RTL, in fact, this is one of the urgent measures that I will present to the Senate, should I be given a chance of serving as Senator of this Republic, to call for the amendment of the rice tarification law, so that the flows of this law, which created so much hardship for our farmers, would be corrected. Am I still on air?
Yes, you are still on air, Secretary Piñol. Please continue. You have 45 seconds.
Okay. Another flow of that law, actually, John, is the provision which relegated the National Food Authority to the role of just being a buffer stocking agency. The RTL actually emasculated the National Food Authority. And so right now, the trading of rice, an important food commodity for Filipino people, is left in the hands of the rice cartel, and they control the price in the market right now. And if we do not correct this, the rice industry will ultimately collapse, and it will be controlled by the rice cartel. They will control the prices in the market to the detriment of our consumers and our rice farmers.
Thank you so much, Secretary Manny Piñol. We gave him an additional 10 seconds because of some technical issues. And now, Secretary Piñol, you will be asking a question to Dr. Minguita Padilla. Secretary Piñol, please ask your question.
Dr. Padilla, I know that
Yes.
the PhilHealth actually is a very important issue in as far as you're concerned. What do you think led to these very serious issues of corruption in the PhilHealth? And if you are elected as senator, what would you introduce as a legislative measure to improve the services of the PhilHealth and to avoid issues of corruption in that agency?
You have 2 minutes.
PhilHealth is a big conundrum. It's such a complicated issue. It's been there for years, and sometimes I think they had too much power without anyone policing them. They're a quasi-judicial organization. They are the investigators, they are the prosecutors, they are the judge and the executors of the punishment. And there has been not enough oversight of PhilHealth. So there's not enough transparency. And this has led to a lot of corruption. And they rule over the doctors and the hospitals, etc., with nobody ruling over them. And what we need is more transparency. As soon, if I am lucky enough to get elected and I will be in the health committee, I will immediately convene the oversight committee. We have to amend the Universal Healthcare Act. So many provisions there. For example, we need to make sure that the IT system of PhilHealth, because that's one of the sources of great corruption, the information technology system is actually audited. Not the funds, not the COA, because it's after the fact. The IT system is audited by an independent, external, reputable organization twice a year randomly. So they don't even know it's going to happen. That's a lot of kalokohan in the IT system. We have to even make sure that they have what they call this tie-ups with the Philippine Statistics Authority, so that dead people don't get paid premiums by the government. Dead people don't get paid benefits by PhilHealth. It's still happening. And we may have to look into actually abolishing it and starting fresh, really, because it's so deep. The syndicate is so deeply entrenched. And we may have to abolish it and start fresh so we can keep the good and get rid of the bad. This is very difficult. And we have to make sure we have to have oversight over the ombudsman and the Sandigan Bayan, so that cases actually move. Because cases have been filed, but they're not moving. And we have to make sure that those who sit in the board are really people of impeccable integrity.
All right, Dr. Padilla, you will now be asking Secretary Castriciones your question.
Hello, Secretary Castriciones.
Hello.
What do you think, how do you think you can improve the land reform situation in the Philippines? And is the current situation ideal, or is the current law ideal?
Secretary John, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you for the question, Dr. Padilla. The Comprehensive Agrarian Reform Program is really flawed. There are a lot of provisions there which have been technically putting to naught the very essence of Comprehensive Agrarian Reform Program. The very purpose of Comprehensive Agrarian Program is to uplift the economic lives of our farmers, but did it? It did not. And that's the reason why we must have to look at it and review it so that we would be able to really attain the goal and objective. The first and the foremost problem there is that in the past, just because they wanted to accomplish a lot and deliver a lot, they were distributing collective cloas. And this collective cloas actually is a piece of paper, one title. It is owned by hundreds or thousands of farmers. And thereafter, the farmers are at a loss because they do not know which portion of the land is theirs. Secondly, they cannot even pay their amortizations with land bank, and therefore they cannot own that land. Thirdly, the municipalities or the so-called local government units cannot collect real property taxes from the farmers who have been given this land. And the most important of all is that these farmers cannot even attain loans from financial institutions, and that is the reason why they are not able to really develop those lands. And because of that, it turned out to be a dud instead of being a very successful program. And so what we did is that we came up with a loan coming from World Bank in the amount of 19 billion pesos just to undo what has been done. And therefore, it is my humble suggestion that if I would be able to really to have a seat in the Senate, I would see to it that we would be able to really come up with an improved version of this land reform program, and that we should not only limit the distribution of lands to our farmers, but considering that at the time of the pandemic, we knew that agriculture really is the solution to this problem. There is no solution in the so-called curing of this.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much to our senatorial candidates for asking each other your respective questions. And before we move on to the next question, let's see some comments from netizens. We asked them what they want to say to our aspiring senators. All right, let's take a look at John N.R. Hizon. And he says, we seriously need a medical practitioner in the Senate. Never forget how the government mismanaged this pandemic. Also, Secretary Piñol knows his issues well. We need these kinds of people. And moving on to another netizen online from Ebeth Quinto. Please pass the anti-dynasty law and freedom of information. And our next netizen who has sent us a message is Danilo Garcia, 1960. Paano ka gagawa ng batas? May karanasan ka na bang gumawa ng batas? Meron ka na bang ambag na kabasa kaunlad ng bayan? And finally, from Janelle Snapshots, well, it is important that our senatorial candidates, each and every one of you, and if you're voted into the 19th Congress, will just love and protect the country. Thank you so much to all our netizens and their comments in tonight's edition of our Senatorial Forum. And for our last question, you also have 2 minutes each to answer and tell us, what is your priority legislation? Ladies first, let's start off with Dr. Padilla. Your time starts now.
Well, as I said earlier, because Secretary Piñol asked me already, I want to amend the UHC and the PhilHealth laws because we need to really strengthen universal health care, but we cannot have universal health care, financial risk security for our health if we don't have a good national health security system. And I will definitely do an oversight of these two very important agencies. I also want to do food security. Together with Secretary Piñol, taking care of the welfare of our farmers and our fisher folk is very, very important to me. And he can tell you more about it later, but we have the same idea. No? We have to have food security. We cannot be dependent on imports. Going back to healthcare, I need to look after the welfare of our healthcare workers, starting from the barangay healthcare workers up. Because the barangay healthcare workers are the frontliners for all seasons, we have to make sure they have at least an honorarium and some benefits, because at this time, they still do not. We have to have a Pandemic Preparedness Act. I heard that Secretary Dairit, former Secretary Dairit, the Department of Health, had a playbook already for the pandemic, and yet nobody saw it, nobody mentioned it, nobody used this for this pandemic. Building on that, we can have a Pandemic Preparedness Act. We have to have our own vaccines. We have to have, we cannot depend on importations of vaccines. We have to have good generics companies. We have to have non-expiring equipment in all the hospitals ready. We have to improve our healthcare infrastructure so we don't have to be dependent on long lockdowns should another pandemic come, and it will come. And we have to have a standing committee for that. Mental health of our youth in connection with the internet, it's a very serious problem. And proper and full implementation of the Organization Act, climate resiliency, protect our sovereignty.
Thank you so much, Dr. Minguita Padilla. Secretary Piñol, you have 2 minutes to tell us your priority legislation.
Actually, I have already prepared a list of the things that I would like to do starting day one, Rico. First, urgent legislation. I will introduce a legislation that would amend and correct the flaws of the rice tariffication law. Number two, we have to correct the market system in this country. We cannot allow middlemen and traders to jack up prices of food commodities from the farm gate to the kitchen of Filipino families. Three, I would like to correct the anti-agriculture and pro-importation policies passed by the previous Senate. And to start it, correctly, we have to achieve food sufficiency. And to do that, we have to first look at the forest of this country. We have to protect the remaining 6% forest cover of this country, because that is where the water for our agriculture and household needs comes from. Number two, we have to implement a national authority or legislate for the creation of a national authority which would manage and conserve our water resources. Number three, we have to create a real farmers and fishermen's bank where agriculture and fishery stakeholders could avail of loans, access loans at low interest rates without so much hassle. And fourth, we have to, as I've said, come up with measures that would improve productivity by offering our farmers a system where they could sell their produce to a food terminal that would reposition all of these food supplies in several parts of the country where these are needed. Our problem in this country is not the lack of food, but the very poor positioning of food, given the fact that we are a fragmented country. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Secretary Piñol. Secretary John, your priority legislation, please. 2 minutes.
Okay, Rico, my priority legislation would be, of course, the food sufficiency and, of course, improving our agricultural sector. You know, 60 to 70% of our population are actually engaged in agriculture or farming. But the irony of it all is that up to now, we are importing rice from other countries. There was a time, several decades ago, when our neighboring countries would come to the Philippines in order to learn how to plant rice. But now, ironically, we are now buying rice from these people whom we taught the ropes of planting palay. And that is the reason why there is really a neglect of our agricultural sector. Now, we came to realize how important agriculture is and farming is, most especially during the time of the pandemic. Actually, COVID-19 does not have any cure as yet. But we know for a fact that every profession, for that matter, can stop, like teaching or lawyers going to court or architects or engineers building structures. But farming or agriculture will never stop because it is the sector that provides food for our society. And we know that, of course, not that I sound pessimistic, but the Spanish influenza, which happened way back in 1914, lasted for 10 years. And now COVID-19, as our experience, is only 2 years old or 3 years old, which means that there might be some variants that will be forthcoming. And there is a need for us to really look forward, to be ready. And the only way that we can be ready with this pandemic, since there's no cure for COVID-19, is that we should have food sufficiency. And the best way to do it is to give lands to people so that they would be able to have meals in order to produce food for our country. Let us not only give lands to the farmers, but to all people who would like to really venture into agriculture, because agriculture is the frontier of our survival.
Thank you so much, the senatorial candidates, for joining us tonight. This has been a CNN Philippines special presentation. I'm Rico Hizon. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next week with another set of senatorial aspirants.